Hello, it's Friday the 15th of March, I believe it is. So I've got my compartment installed. This is the left side of the bus. And I've already trimmed this piece of sheet metal, and it goes to right about there. And I got this piece of sheet metal from the other side of the bus. There was a small compartment here, and the original sheet metal wouldn't do for what I need. And so I found this, and it's exactly the right size somehow. Just good luck. I like good luck. So I've installed this with just 2 screws just to get it in place. And I got this thing hanging by 1 screw. And when I get this in place, I'm going to go behind and put a scratch in the back of it where I need to cut. So this is going to have a cut in it all the way across here and down here. But what I wanted to show you, this is a little bit of my technique. I've got the 1 screw in there, and I held it up there with one hand and marked it with another hand, holding the pen and all. And so my height is good. I'm happy with that. But you see my edge right here? I need to go that way about a 1/16 of an inch. Actually, I don't really have to go that way, a 1/16 of an inch. I was thinking it would be nice to make this side flush with this piece of metal here, just to give me every little bit that I can get for the overlap on that side, as I have only about a 1/2 of an inch overlap, and I'd like to get a little bit more. Yeah, look at that, there's that hole. Where is it? Right there, there's a hole exposing. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to slot this hole about a 1/16 of an inch on the left side, so the sheet metal will move over a little bit. And once I'm happy with where I have it, yeah, 1/16 of an inch, it'll cover up that hole right there. Then I'll go ahead and mark the rest of the holes and install it. See, so this side is covered by the door, so it doesn't matter even if it's short. Maybe I'll move it over about an 1/8 of an inch. And an 1/8 of an inch is about the maximum I can go, so the bolt head will still cover the slot in the hole. Okay, and then what we're going to do, we're going to come back. I want to put 1 screw right here through both of these pieces of metal to hold this secure. I want to put a nut and a bolt here. I've got these really nice number 12s that the heads look almost identical to these. And I'll put a couple, maybe 2 nuts and bolts here, just to stiffen up the edge that's going to be here. Maybe I'll put 3, we'll see how that goes. And then on this side, I planned on putting flathead countersunk screws so that the door will be able to sit flat up against it. And I'm probably going to put a piece of like weather strip rubber stuff there, just so that the paint doesn't rub. Not that I need to keep any water out of there, but just to make for a nice closure. Alright, I'll come back in a couple minutes and show you how it's turned out. Alright, I'm getting ready to transfer the holes in that sheet metal. And I thought of using this tool to do it for me rather than trying to use a center punch or something, because that sheet metal is not very rigid. I made this tool about 20 years ago. And this is still the original drill bit I made it with, because so far I've only used this on wood. Hopefully I won't break the bit doing what I'm doing, but I think it's just a 1/16 inch drill bit or 5/64 or something. But This is made out of a bolt. And what I did was, before I even had a lathe, I cut this bolt head off and cut the thread part off, so I just had the shank of the bolt, and I put this in the chuck of the drill press, and then I put the drill bit in the vise. I think I might have put a center punch mark on this first, and then with the drill press running, it would operate like a lathe, and I drilled the bolt over the bit. Okay, and then once I had that done, I used the file on the side to put this 45 looking degree angle on it. So let me show you how it works. I'm going to come over here to the bus. So you put the bit in the drill, and then you take this bolt half part and it centers itself on the hole, right? And then you just drill through and you've got a pilot hole dead center where you want it. I made this originally for doing hinges. It works great for that. So I already slotted this hole as much as I dare to do it, because I don't want the slot to poke through the side of the head there. And you can see now, maybe you can anyway, that the sheet metal is now just a shy over to the right of being flush with this.
Steven?
Yeah, babe.
I don't know what happened today.
All right. So where was I? Yeah. So we moved the sheet metal over as much as we can. It gave us a tad bit more overlap, and I'm comfortable with it. Okay, so I've already drilled one. See if I can find this for you there. You can't get much dead on than that, can you? All right. All right, so I'm in here behind the back side of the compartment, I guess you could say, or back side of the bus, whatever. So you see the little scratch I put there? Right there. Put that there for reference to gauge the height of the box. And I put another one right there. So, with the angle that I'm holding the phone, you can't really tell that scratch, maybe you can, I don't know. I'm not able to see it. But the scratch is level with the aluminum right there. And so is that one. I don't even know if I'm aiming in the right spot because I can't see the back of my phone, but so then also I put the scratch down, and this is the tool I use, by the way, down here. So I'm going to cut along that. The two reference scratches that I made are just so that I can gauge where to cut this. It was, I think, 600 thousandths of an inch, or 0.6 inches of a gap that I left on that side of the box, right down there. I'll measure it to be sure, and it more or less matches the gap that's going to be down that side. So I want the same gap on the top. Alright, so that's the idea anyway. So now I got to crawl out from under here. I'm going to take the sheet metal back off again, and we're going to put a scratch. I guess that's what I'm looking for right there, now that I think about it. I also put a scratch right at the edge of this metal on that. So the difference between that scratch and that scratch is going to be this space that I'm leaving right here, which it's still actually adjustable to the fact that I could make the gap bigger, this space right here wider if I want to, and I might, because I think I measured it and it's within a few, like 30 thousandths, which is like a 32nd of an inch from the side. But when you look at it, it looks narrower at the top. If I remember right, on the other side I made the top gap a little bit wider just so it would look better. And yeah, we'll be putting a screw right around here, nut and a bolt. There's already a screw going to go behind here. This piece of square tubing that's here is part of the original box that was here, the compartment box. I opted to just leave this in rather than trying to cut all these welds out because it was so much trouble. I found out on the other side. Oh yeah, this is, if you watched my prior video, this is the spot where I accidentally burned the hole through here with my cutting torch. And I plugged this with the Gorilla adhesive. I used it like a caulk sealer. It works great. It's good stuff. And a piece of wax paper to form it so it wouldn't stick to my fingers. And I just left it stuck to the wax paper overnight. And the next morning I came out and then the wax paper peeled right off like it wasn't even nothing, man. So that's a good trick for you guys, wax paper. So, all right, I'm going to get out from under here and work on the sheet metal, and hopefully I can get this done before dark. Okay, so here's the same piece of metal I got at the shop. That's the bottom. And I checked this with my caliper, and it's very true to the edge, which is cool. And then I checked this one with my caliper. And let me loosen that up. I kind of missed a little bit, didn't I? Right about there. Alright. I'm just using this for comparison. Come over here, and you know, I'm going to call that the same. So what that means, this will be an easy piece to cut because I can use the table saw. I'll be able to put this in with this rough side up, which is good because this doesn't slide well on the table saw, plus this interferes, stiffen or bend that's in there. So I'll rub this along the table saw's fence. You know, this will be a 90-degree turn, and I'll be able to cut not here at this line, but here. This was my reference mark just to make sure that I was in line with the compartment. That's the spot where I need to cut it. So, matter of fact, before I do anything else, as soon as I put this iPhone down, I'm going to put like a circle around that to make sure I don't cut at the wrong spot. And then when that's cut up to here, maybe I'll make that the second cut. And since this one is also parallel with the edge, yeah, I'll do this one first. I'll go ahead and cut this guy. And it needs to stop wherever this one is. I got to remember not to cut all the way through or I'm going to screw up. This is where the 90-degree is. Alright, so I roughed out just to remind myself with my Sharpie pen that this is where the 90 goes. And that's where I want the cut to be on that, so I don't make a mistake. Now I'm going to get into the cutting. Alright, I decided to do some more laying out and measuring to make sure I'm not messing up here. So I took my dial caliper and set it to that, and then I came over here and I put a scratch right there. You see it? So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to drill a hole here so that the side of the hole is on either of those parts. So when I'm done here, I'll have a little tiny radius in that corner. It'll hold paint better, and it'll help the piece of metal drop out. Okay, we're set up at the table saw. So I'm cutting on the back side of the fence, which is a little weird. Normally the fence has got a little bit of a, when it's on this side, when normal side, there's a little bit of a cant to it, just a tiny bit, so that the when your wood or whatever is going through there, the back side of the blade doesn't get locked in between to the fence. So I'm just, for a couple, there's a couple reasons why I set the blade this low, so that phenomenon of the fence having a little bit of cant to it won't cause a bind, but also this has more of a slice as it cuts than if the blade were up higher. The teeth would be coming down on the metal and chopping down into it, so that'll make a smoother cut. And also it's that low, so I'm not going to cut through this entire piece right here. This will hold that from squeezing in from any heat that might generate during the cut. So that's the idea anyway, so we don't have those things fighting, and that'll hold everything together until I cut this. There's my hole. Okay. Alright, so I'm going to cut that and stop right there. And I'm going to shut the saw down. And I'm going to turn this piece around. I'm going to cut this piece next here. And when I come over here, all this is going to like start coming apart. I might stop in the middle and then put a clamp over the cut here just to hold it straight. We'll see how that goes. Because it's kind of scary cutting this with a wood cutting blade, which I don't recommend, but it's the only thing I've got, and the Cinema gun works great. So here we go. Okay, here's the cut. Here's the kerf that comes off the top of the blade. The blade is getting dull. The kerf was actually glowing red a little bit. But you can see where I intentionally cut a little bit bigger just to give me some room to trim it if I decide I actually want to, or file it, whatever. I'll probably just move the saw blade, move the fence over a hair, and give it another little trim. But I'm actually about a 1/16 of an inch or a 32nd of an inch away from the line, which is good. And I stopped short for two reasons. Since the blade is so low, part of the cut on the bottom side is further along than the cut on the top side. So I didn't want to have a notch to deal with on the opposite side. This is not wood, so it's not so easy to fill. So I'm going to leave this. It's cut clean through. That's the table saw underneath there. So now you can see that everything is still rigid. It's all together. That's because I left that little piece right there. This is just kerf right here. I don't want to mess with it any more than that. I'll cut myself. But that little edge right there is holding this all together nice. So now we're going to reorient this whole thing around, and we're going to make this cut. Oh, and by the way, I failed to mention, I'm wearing gloves, which I normally would never do on rotating equipment like a saw like this. But due to the nature of what I'm working on, I want to make sure I've got my hands protected. I'm wearing a face shield, and they also have earplugs in. All right, I'm getting ready to set up on this side of the blade now, the normal way you would use a table saw. And it occurred to me I didn't mention one of the tricks I use. So all table saws have a little bit of a gap between the fence and the table. The gap on mine is pretty large, and this piece of sheet metal will actually slip under it. So to combat that, I've got this scrap piece of Delrin. I just happen to have it and it works great. It's got a little bit of a bow in it. So I always use it with the bow in the middle this way. So one clamp, when I clamp it here, it's tight on both ends as well. And so this now is flush with the table, and the sheet metal won't accidentally go underneath it. The clamp also acts as a little bit of a safety to keep my work if it were to kick back or something. So now we have to make a measurement between this surface and that side of the blade to match the dimension from here to here, plus a hair to compensate for a goof up. Okay, I'm over here double checking myself, and I realized I goofed. I set this up to cut on the wrong side of the line. My measurement to meet this line here needs to be on the other side, this side of the blade. I would have made an 1/8 of an inch mistake if I would have not double checked myself. Okay, I take back what I said a minute ago, and this is why you measure twice or measure 8 times and cut once. That was wrong. I do want to cut on this side of the line, because this is the piece I'm keeping and this is the piece that I'm getting rid of. So I reset, and let me pull in here a little bit so you can see I'm a little bit bigger. This piece is a little bit bigger where the cut's going to be than where that line is, just so I'm a little on the safe side. Okay, I wish I could show you this cut. I just don't have a tripod or anything to hold my phone. But it cuts right through this thing very easily. The blade certainly doesn't like it. It doesn't sound bad or anything, but the kerf is glowing red because the blade is pretty well shot right now. And so I stopped short over here, and what I realized is my radius didn't end up in the right spot somehow or another, or maybe my fence moved. I gotta double check what's going on here. Let's see. Okay, that looks like it's almost exactly what I wanted. It's a little bit on the big side, which is good. And this is exactly what I wanted. So it's within thousandths of an inch of being perfectly straight. And I'm good with that. I just must have goofed on this measurement the first time. And that is the reason why you cut a little bit on the big side. So now I'm going to take my jigsaw and I'm going to finish these cuts so I have a much safer tool to use when this breaks free. For here, here, and here. Alright, so I cut through. I lost my radius because I drilled that hole in the wrong place. Hey, you know what? You do your best and you take what you can get, right? So we got this cut, and we got this cut. And before I do anything else, this piece is leftover. I'm going to trim these off and file off these sharp edges and trim that little bump off that's there. And then I'll stick this in my stack full of extra metal, so I won't take a chance of cutting myself when I go digging around through it. And then before I test fit this, I'll take off some of the sharpness of this just for safety. Okay, so I'm really close. I gave this another little trim. I took about 3/32 of an inch off, which is 1.5/16. And I don't think, yeah, I guess you could just barely see the original scratch I had. So like I'm pretty much right on the money here. I got to double check everything, but it's just getting too dark out. I can't see good enough, and I don't want to do anything by guessing. But it looks great right about there. Let me show you, I guess. Alright, so there's a hole there. Alright. So I'm pretty much on the spot there. I think I might trim that a hair, maybe not. I still got a little bit of filing to do. But I mean, that's like not less than a 1/16 from being equal with the other piece there. And I think this is just pretty much perfect all the way around. But again, I can't really see all that well in the dark here. These old senior citizen eyeballs just don't do what they used to do. So I'm going to leave this for tomorrow. And by the way, you can buy blades that look like this that are made for cutting metal. I've read up the reviews on like the Home Depot site and stuff, and people have complained that they don't really hold up very well. And I think they're like 40 to 50 bucks. So that's why I decided to try using this wood blade. This was a 7 1/4 or no, 6.5 inch, I think, skill saw blade. That's a leftover from the old days. That was my father's, and he probably used that 50 years ago. So that was back in the day when things were made really well. But if you look close, you can see those teeth have really taken a beating. And that one looks pretty good, I guess. Again, the edges are knocked off. But I mean, considering I just cut steel with this wood cutting blade, it's holding up remarkably well. I mean, look at that. I mean, if I tried to cut wood with it right now, it'd probably smoke and all that. But yeah, that tooth there has got like a shiny spot where the corners broke off or something. But all in all, this little guy is doing what it needs to do. You know, I mentioned this in another video. I cut this piece with it, and I cut this piece with it, and I cut that piece with it, and now I've cut this with it. So that's like, what, 8, 16, 20, 30 feet worth of cutting steel with a wood cutting blade. Not bad, I'd say. Price is right. And here's what the cut looks like. I've never used one of the blades that are made for cutting steel, so I can't compare. Maybe you guys could chime in on what you think how the cut is, but it's not bad, you know. If I wanted to, I could put my carborundum wheel on there. I've done this before, and then just lightly trim it with the carborundum. Not really even trim it, just like kind of sanding edge with the carborundum while it's in the table saw, that is. So this I filed a little bit already, so some of this is a little bit smoother. But yeah, man, regular old wood cutting blade. I can't speak for anything else on the market that's for sale today, but if you got one, hey, try it. Wear plenty of safety equipment. Treat it with a lot of respect, like it's going to kick back. I had no issues with it whatsoever. I did not pull my piece back out of the table saw. while it was running. Once I stopped my cut, like in this corner, I held it firmly in place and I used my other hand to shut the saw off, and I waited for it to stop before I repositioned. I feel perfectly safe doing this work with that blade.